Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Sport This Week video. And in today's video, I've got baseball, basketball, tennis, rugby, football, NFL, ice hockey, Moto GP, UFC, boxing, cricket, and Formula 1 news. If you are new around here though and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do need like the video, and let's get straight into it. So, starting off this week, I'm going to start off with the baseball news. So, Yankees won 3-1 versus Rangers. Red Sox won 4-3 versus Rays. Astros lost 3-0 versus Phillies. Dodgers lost 2-1 versus Rockies. Yankees won 5-4 versus Rangers. Red Sox won 6-0 versus Rays. Yankees lost 3-2 versus Rangers. Astros won 10-0 versus Phillies. Dodgers lost 5-2 versus Rockies. Yankees lost 4-2 versus Rangers. Red Sox won 6-3 versus Rays. Astros won 3-2 versus Phillies, and Dodgers won 6-1 versus Rockies. And yeah, that is all of the baseball news. Moving on to the basketball news now. So Lakers won 105-75 versus Kings. Heat lost 121 to 111 versus Timberwolves. Celtics lost 125 to 119 versus Raptors. Lakers lost 119 to 115 versus Suns. Heat won 109 to 80 versus Nets. Lakers lost 114 to 99 versus Timberwolves. Celtics won 112 to 103 versus Hornets, and Heat won 111 to 108 versus Grizzlies. And yeah, that is all the basketball news. Moving on to the tennis news now, where it's the Astana Open, where Tsitsipas won 2-0 versus Kukushkin. Alcaraz lost 2-0 versus Goffin. Medvedev won 2-0 versus Ramos Vinolas. It was also the Ostrava Open, where Raducanu lost 2-0 versus Katsakina. It was also the Jasmine Open, where Jabeur won 2-0 versus Lee. Djokovic won 2-0 versus Garin. Tsitsipas won 2-0 versus Lardy. Swiatek won by retirement versus Tomjanovic. Badoza lost 2-0 versus Kvitova. Sakari lost 2-1 versus Parks. Djokovic won 2-0 versus Van der Zandschulp. Medvedev won 2-0 versus Rusevori. Kontaviet lost via retirement versus Martinkova. Jabeur won 2-0 versus Rodina. Tsitsipas won 2-0 versus Hurkacz. Djokovic won 2-0 versus Kachanov. Medvedev won 2-0 versus Batista Agut. Swiatek won 2-0 versus McNally. Jabeur lost 2-1 versus Liv. Tsitsipas won 2-1 versus Rublev. Djokovic won via retirement versus Medvedev. Swiatek won 2-1 versus Alexandrova. Djokovic won 2-0 versus Tsitsipas to win the men's singles Astana Open. Mertens won 2-0 versus Cornet to win the women's singles Jasmine Open. And Swiatek lost 2-1 versus Krejcikova to win the women's singles Ostrava Open. And yeah, that is all the tennis news. Moving on to the rugby news now, where there's only one bit of news, and that's England won 50-0 versus Fiji. And yeah, that is all the rugby news. Moving on to the NFL news now, where Chiefs won 41-31 versus Buccaneers. Rams lost 24-9 versus 49ers. Packers lost 27-22 versus Giants. Williams suffers torn ACL. Patterson on injured reserves. Patriots won 29-0 versus Lions. Dolphins won 40-17 versus Jets, and Buccaneers won 21-15 versus Falcons. And yeah, that is all the NFL news. Moving on to the ice hockey news now. Maple Leafs won 5-1 versus Canadiens. Bruins won 1-0 versus Devils. Red Wings lost 3-2 versus Penguins. Canadiens lost 5-4 versus Senators. Red Wings lost 4-2 versus Capitals. Bruins won 5-4 versus Rangers. Canadiens lost 4-3 versus Senators. Red Wings won 4-2 versus Maple Leafs. Canadiens lost 3-2 versus Senators. Maple Leafs won 5-1 versus Islanders. Robertson has signed a 4-year deal with Stars. Uyghur has signed a 8-year deal with Flames. Chicago have traded Dickinson and a 2024 second round pick for Stillman. Vesey has signed a 1-year deal with Rangers. Aston Reese has signed a 1-year deal with Maple Leafs, and Flames has signed Sutter. And yeah, that is all the ice hockey news. Moving on to the football news now. Wilder has been sacked by Middlesbrough. Leicester won 4-0 versus Forest. Higuain has retired. Tomlin has retired. Leipzig won 3-1 versus Celtic. Salzburg won 1-0 versus Zagreb. Benfica drew 1-1 versus PSG. Chelsea won 3-0 versus Milan. Juventus won 3-1 versus Hafi. at Haifa. Man City won 5-0 versus Copenhagen. Real Madrid won 2-1 versus Shakhtar Donetsk. Dortmund won 4-1 versus Sevilla. Bayern won 5-0 versus Plzen. Marseille won 4-1 versus Sporting. Napoli won 6-1 versus Ajax. Bruges won 2-0 versus Atletico. Frankfurt drew 0-0 versus Spurs. Inter won 1-0 versus Barcelona. Liverpool won 2-0 versus Rangers. Porto won 2-0 versus Leverkusen. Midtjylland drew 2-2 versus Feyenoord. Arsenal won 3-0 versus Bodo Glimt. Rennes won 2-1 versus Kiev. Fenerbahce won 2-0 versus Larnaca. Betis won 2-1 versus Roma. St. Gilloise won 2-1 versus Braga. Qarabag won 3-0 versus Olympiacos. Freiburg won 2-0 versus Nantes. Sturm drew 0-0 versus Lazio. Sociedad won 2-0 versus Sheriff. Manu won 3-2 versus Omonia. PSV won 5-1 versus Zurich. HJK drew 1-1 versus Ludogorets. Union Berlin won 1-0 versus Malmo. Crvena Zvezda won 4-1 versus Ferencvaros. Monaco won 3-0 versus Trabzonspor. West Ham won 1-0 versus Anderlecht. Silkeborg won 5-0 versus FCSB. Lech drew 0-0 versus Beersheva. Nice won 1-0 versus Slovaco. Dnipro drew 1-1 versus Vaduz. Molde won 3-0 versus Shamrock Rovers. Balkany won 4-3 versus Sivasspor. Punic won 2-0 versus Zalgiris. Fiorentina won 3-0 versus Hearts. RFS drew 0-0 versus Istanbul Başakşehir. Villarreal won 5-0 versus Vienne. Partizan won 1-0 versus Cologne. AZ won 3-2 versus Apollon. Djurgården won 1-0 versus Ghent. CFR Cluj won 1-0 versus Slavia Prague. Slovan Bratislava won 2-0 versus Basel. Cooper has signed a 3-year deal with Forest, 3-year contract extension with Forest. England won 2-1 versus USA. Bournemouth won 1-0 versus Leicester. Chelsea won 3-0 versus Wolves. Man City won 4-0 versus Southampton. Newcastle won 5-1 versus Brentford. Inter won 2-1 versus Sassuolo. Spurs won 1-0 versus Brighton. Real Madrid won 1-0 versus Getafe. Reims drew 0-0 versus PSG. Dortmund drew 2-2 versus Bayern. Milan won 2-0 versus Juventus. Arsenal won 3-2 versus Liverpool. Palace won 2-1 versus Leeds. West Ham won 3-1 versus Fulham. Man U won 2-1 versus Everton. Napoli won 4-1 versus Cremonese. Sociedad won 1-0 versus Villarreal. Mead won England's Women's Player of the Year. Barcelona won 1-0 versus Celta Vigo. And that is all of the football news. So moving on to the cricket news now. South Africa won by 49 runs versus India. Australia won by 3 wickets versus West Indies. South Africa won by 9 runs versus India. Pakistan won by 21 runs versus Bangladesh. Australia won by 31 runs versus West Indies. Pakistan won by 6 wickets versus Australia. India won by 7 wickets versus South Africa. England won by 8 runs versus Australia. And that is all the cricket news. Moving on to the boxing news now. Janibek versus Bentley and Senesia versus Villarino will fight on the 12th of November. Fury will fight Bamba on the 13th of November. Martinez will rematch Arroyo on the 3rd of December. Riley will fight on the 12th of November. Lara versus San Martin. Meiti versus Sanchez and Fierro versus Cuevas will fight on the 22nd of October. There was a new belt added to the Marshall vs Shields fight, that being the WBC Elizabethan belt. JMX will fight Ginty on the 15th of October. Eubank Jr. versus Ben was cancelled due to Ben testing positive for a drug, which I'm very annoyed at because I was really looking forward to that fight, and it probably won't happen again now, and it's uncertainty whether or not Ben will be fighting anytime in the near future. It's kind of deserved really if he's testing positive for drugs, but I'll keep you posted on kind of what happens with that. Yard Avanesian versus Miguez, James versus Parker, Taylor, Strond, Hayden, Davey, Mohammed, Macaulay Owen, some we've had on the channel. Cooper and Davis versus Baluta will fight on the 19th of November. Romero will fight Scotney on the 29th of October. Yafai will fight Rodriguez on the 5th of November. Courtenay will fight on the 10th of December. Hogan won by a majority decision versus Eggington to become IBO World Super Welterweight Champion. Dietz versus Filka and Bayer versus Baloga will fight on the 22nd of October. Foley won by unanimous decision versus Minto to become IBO International Super Lightweight Champion. Adamis won via KO in round 3 versus Montiel to become a WBC Interim World Middleweight Champion, which I did predict that he would win, from what I remember. Fundora won via unanimous decision versus Ocampo to remain WBC Interim World Super Welterweight Champion, which I also did predict right. I believe I said a knockout, but I still said that Fundora would win. Martinez won via unanimous decision versus Ancajas to remain IBF World Super Flyweight Champion, and Benitez won via split decision versus Xu. And yeah, that is all the boxing news. Moving on to UFC news now, where there's only one bit of news, that being Thompson will fight Holland on the 3rd of December. Moving on to the Moto GP news, where there's also only one bit of news, that being Anderson has been added to the Hall of Fame. And then moving on to the final sport, which is the F1 news now, where Gasly to drive for Alpine from 2023, De Vries has signed for AlphaTauri for 2023. It was the Japan Grand Prix, where Verstappen was on pole, Leclerc started second, and Sainz started third. In the end, Verstappen won, Perez came second, and Leclerc came third. Sainz and Albon did not finish, but it meant that Verstappen is the F1 World Champion of the Drivers' Championships for the second time in a row. So a big congratulations to Verstappen. It's been a very convincing season for him, realistically. I mean, there was a bit of like a threat at the start from Ferrari, but very convincing season for them, and there's not too many more races now. So a big congratulations to Verstappen. And yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video. If you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.